You know when you're with someone, maybe on a date, and things are just off? I'm not talking about your typical awkward first date stuff, like not knowing what to say or spilling your drink. I'm talking about that gut feeling, the kind that whispers in the back of your mind, something isn't right. Well, this is a story about one of those times, and it went way, way beyond just a gut feeling. It started pretty simply. I was dating this girl named Emily, and we were still in that early phase where everything was new and exciting. She was gorgeous, smart, and a little mysterious, which honestly made me like her even more. We had been out a few times, mostly for coffee or a quick bite, but this was our first real date night. You know, the whole dinner and a movie type of thing. I was actually pretty pumped because it felt like things were progressing, and I liked where we were headed. We decided to see a movie. It wasn't some big blockbuster or anything, just a thriller that had decent reviews. I remember thinking it was a safe choice. Not too scary, but just tense enough to give me an excuse to lean in a little closer if things got intense. You know how it goes. I booked tickets for a late night show, figuring we'd grab a bite to eat first, maybe a drink after if things went well. Just a chill Friday night. Emily seemed pretty into the idea, and the night started off fine. We met at this small Italian place near the theater, had a couple of drinks, and everything felt normal. We were laughing, chatting, and there wasn't any weird tension in the air. It was going so smoothly that I thought, yeah, tonight's gonna be great, but I had no idea what was coming. When we got to the theater, I noticed something was a bit off. Nothing major at first, just small things. The theater was nearly empty, which was odd for a Friday night. I figured maybe the movie wasn't as popular as I thought, or people just had other plans that night. It wasn't a big deal, but you know when things start stacking up and it just feels weird? That was the first brick in the wall. We grabbed our popcorn, and the guy at the concession stand didn't even look at us. He handed us the snacks, kind of like he was on autopilot, and didn't say a word. Again, not a huge red flag, but still, the whole place felt off. It was like the energy was sucked out of the room. Emily didn't seem to notice, though. She was just chatting away, excited about the movie. We walked into the theater, and it was practically empty. There were only a couple of people scattered around. One older guy sitting by himself near the front, and a couple sitting way in the back. That's it. Normally, I'd be all for an empty theater. It meant no distractions, right? But something about how quiet and still the room felt made my skin crawl. I tried to shake it off and focus on having a good time. Emily and I sat right in the middle, perfect seats, and the trailer started playing. She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder, and for a moment I was able to relax. But then, halfway through the second trailer, I noticed something strange. The older guy in the front row, he hadn't moved. At all. Not to adjust in his seat, not to eat popcorn, not to check his phone. Nothing. He was just sitting there completely still, staring straight ahead. I nudged Emily and whispered, "Hey, check out that guy in the front. Is he even blinking?" She glanced over, squinting through the dim light of the screen, and then shrugged. "Maybe he's just really into the trailers," she whispered back with a laugh. I tried to let it go, but something about him gave me the creeps. The way he sat there, so rigid and motionless, like he wasn't even breathing. I couldn't explain why, but I suddenly felt the urge to keep an eye on him. As the movie started, I found myself glancing his way every few minutes, just to make sure he was still there. And he was, every time. Sitting completely still, eyes locked on the screen. About 20 minutes into the movie, things got even weirder. I heard something behind us, a quiet rustling sound, like someone shifting in their seat. At first, I thought it was the couple in the back row, but when I turned around to look, they were gone. Their seats were empty. Now, That in itself wouldn't have been too strange. Maybe they just left. But I hadn't heard them get up. You know how in a nearly empty theater, every little sound is amplified? You can hear people whisper or someone unwrapping candy from across the room. But I didn't hear anything. No footsteps, no creaky chairs. Just nothing. I glanced at Emily, wondering if she noticed anything, but she was totally engrossed in the movie. I didn't want to freak her out, so I kept quiet, but the back of my neck was starting to tingle, in that way it does, when you know something is wrong. A few more minutes passed, and that rustling sound started up again, but louder this time. Closer. I whipped my head around, expecting to see someone standing right behind me, but the theater was empty. Just rows and rows of seats, bathed in the dim glow of the movie screen. My heart was pounding now. I was starting to feel that creeping sense of dread, like when you know you're being watched. I leaned over to Emily and whispered, "Hey, I think something's up." She looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" "I don't know, it's just... something feels wrong. The couple behind us is gone, and I keep hearing noises." She frowned and looked around. "Maybe they just went to the bathroom or something?" "Maybe," I said, though I didn't believe it for a second. And then, just as I turned back to the screen, I saw him, the older guy in the front row. He was no longer sitting. He was standing now, but not like a normal person. He was facing away from the screen, staring directly at us. My stomach dropped. There was no reason for him to be looking at us like that. And yet, there he was, just standing there unmoving, his face partially obscured by the shadows. I couldn't see his expression clearly, but I could feel his eyes on us, watching. "Emily, we need to leave," I said to her, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me, her eyes wide now. "Why? What's going on?" I didn't have time to explain. I grabbed her hand and pulled her up. As we stood, the man in the front row took a step forward. Not fast, but deliberate, like he was closing the distance between us. We bolted. I didn't care if I was overreacting, I just knew we had to get out of there. As we ran up the aisle, I glanced back. The man was still walking toward us, slowly, but with purpose. And worse, I noticed movement in the back of the theater. The couple I thought had left, they were there again, standing in the shadows, watching us too. By the time we hit the lobby, my heart was racing. We didn't stop until we were outside, gasping for air under the flickering streetlights. "What the hell was that?" Emily asked. "I don't know, but that guy... something was wrong with him. And the couple in the back? They were gone. Then they were just... back." She stared at me, and for the first time that night, I could see fear in her eyes. We didn't stick around to find out what was going on. We jumped in my car and drove off as fast as we could. Neither of us said much for the rest of the night, but we both knew something wasn't right. I don't know who or what those people were, but I never went back to that theater again. And to this day, every time I think about it, I get chills. Because there was no explanation. No rational way to explain what happened. All I know is that something or someone was watching us that night. And whoever they weren't normal. So, if you're ever sitting in a quiet, nearly empty theater and you feel like you're being watched, trust your gut.